Like so many other parts of California's failing infrastructure, the Sacramento-San Joaquin River Delta is in dangerous disrepair. This crisis in the Delta may not be as immediately apparent as the state's failing roads, bridges, and dams, but the impact of its failure will be just as disastrous. There's an old saying about government plans and budgets that says, "The devil is in the details," meaning that even the most well-intentioned plans may have unintended and even dangerous consequences if the underlying details are flawed. Such is the case in the Delta, where in the early 1990s, state regulators adopted policies that inhibited Delta engineers from properly maintaining the Delta's system of waterways and levees. Since that time, sediment from the winter storm runoff has been filling up and choking the Delta waterways. At the same time, this sediment or dirt, which was once used to build and maintain the Delta levees, is no longer available for this purpose. Consequently, the Delta levees are in dangerous disrepair. When the Delta levees fail, we will not end up with an inland marsh as some believe, but rather an inland salton sea disastrous to the native fish and fowl that rely on it for spawning and nesting. So, although well-intentioned, current anti-dredging policies are having unintended and disastrous consequences. In this case, the devil is in the dirt. This brief documentary will explain the causes of this dire situation and steps we can take to save the Delta before it's too late.
I'm Gilbert Cosio, president of MBK Engineers of Sacramento, California. We are a civil engineering firm specializing in water resources, both water supply and flood control. As part of our flood control responsibilities, we assist Delta reclamation districts in maintaining their levees. We represent about 40% of the entire Delta. The landowners we work for include the state of California, NGOs such as the Nature Conservancy, and many family farmers. The Delta levees are vital infrastructure to the state of California. They provide conveyance capacity for water being shipped through the Delta to farmers in the San Joaquin Valley and municipalities in Southern California. They also provide protection to the existing wildlife and habitat in the Delta, including fish and migratory waterfowl. All habitat in the Delta is either formed by the levees in the meandering waterways or protected by the levees. The key ingredient to maintaining Delta levees is the availability of fill material. Every year, 900,000 tons on average are deposited in Delta channels. This is more than enough material to reinforce failing levees and improve the health of the Delta. Dredging of Delta channels and utilization of this sediment can be performed for about $5 per yard, compared to upwards of $25 per yard by using imported material.
Prior to the early 1990s, the Delta levees were regularly reinforced using the dirt deposited from annual winter runoff. The cost to remove this dirt from the channel bottoms and place it on the adjacent levees was relatively inexpensive, approximately $5 per yard. Consequently, this process of clearing the channel bottoms and reinforcing the levees occurred regularly throughout the Delta. In the early 1990s, state regulators severely restricted this process. The cost to reinforce the levees by bringing in outside dirt is approximately $25 per yard, prohibitive to the private agencies responsible for maintaining the levees. Consequently, the Delta levees and waterways are in a severe state of disrepair. Each year during winter rains, over 3 million tons of sediment is carried from the Sierra Nevada downstream through the Delta waterways. Although much of this dirt is carried out to the San Francisco Bay, approximately 900,000 tons settle at the bottom of Delta waterways each and every year. To illustrate the volume of 900,000 tons of dirt, imagine 250,000 dump trucks building a mountain of dirt as tall as the Statue of Liberty. Even more concerning is the amount of dirt that has been deposited in Delta waterways since the early 1990s, when state regulators restricted the removal of this dirt from the Delta. This accumulation of dirt has continued to overwhelm the Delta waterways. Over the past 30 years, the amount of dirt clogging Delta waterways is mind-boggling. This immense amount of dirt chokes the free-flowing waterways of the Delta, restricting floodwaters during heavy runoff. Further, the restriction of waterways inhibits fish from freely traveling to their spawning grounds throughout the Delta and upstream. The precipitation or depositing of sediment onto the delta waterway bottom occurs as fast-flowing rivers begin to slow as they transition from the foothills to the valley floor. As the land flattens, the rivers begin to snake in a sinuous manner. This is particularly apparent in the delta. As the rivers slow, the sediment carried in the water begins to precipitate or fall to the bottom of the delta waterways, causing them to silt up. This overhead map of the delta illustrates how the delta water channels have gradually silted up over the past 30 years. Prior to the 1990s, when the channels were cleared by dredging, the water flowed freely through the various delta channels. However, after the 1990s, when the regulation restricted dredging, the channels began to silt up. Over time, as silt accumulates unchecked, the river bottoms rise and the ability of delta channels to convey water is reduced. Consequently, the water levels in the delta rise along with the rising river bottoms. This process is particularly severe during the wet season. This increase in water level causes undue stress and pressure on the levees.
The deposition of sediment in the delta channels causes constrictions that can lead to increased pressures on the delta levees in the form of high erosion forces and increased water surfaces. This is particularly important in years like this one, where we had high water for a number of months.
As pressure builds on the levees due to high water and restricted water flow, seepage begins to occur through the levees and onto the delta islands. The cause behind the seepage is very simple. An ideal levee has a gentle slope from the top to both the water and the farmland below. This wide base provides a more solid support against water pressure. When the delta water is high, the pressure on the levees is severe. Over time, the levees continue to weaken due to disrepair and continued seepage. Eventually, this situation leads to levee failure with disastrous effects. A full-blown break is devastating to the delta. The most recent example of levee failure in the delta occurred in June 2004 when a levee breach caused more than 150,000 acre-feet of water to flood the entire island of Jones Tract. As indicated earlier, when delta islands flood, the result is a deep water saline inland lake. Because of years of land subsidence due to natural oxidation of the soil, the delta islands are well below sea level. In some instances, 50 feet below sea level. Therefore, when the land is flooded, it is too deep to develop back into wildlife-friendly marsh. The failure of delta levees, and ultimately the failure of the delta itself, is imminent. Unless we address this problem at hand now, we will soon be faced with a crisis that will be devastating to all of us.